Hi everyone, welcome to Crochet State of Mind. In this video, I'm going to show you how I crocheted a baby cardigan for my toddler. This cardigan was worked in 5 pieces, a back panel, 2 front panels, and 2 sleeves. For this project, I used I Love This Cotton yarn from Hobby Lobby in the color 12 Buttercup. This is 100% cotton. It's 180 yards per skein. It requires a 5.5mm hook, although I used a 5mm hook for this project. So I've already completed the back panel. I am going to show you how to do the front panels, which is super easy. The front panels are just half of the back panels. And so this cardigan is worked in the length. So we're working the length of the cardigan, not the width. And so make sure you have your child's measurements. And for the length, I measured from my daughter's shoulder bone all the way down to about her hips. And so I use those measurements to create the chain. So we're not going to have the same number of chains depending on the measurements. So this is the back panel once it's flipped horizontally. So for the front panel, the first front panel, I am going to chain 54 chains plus 1 for the turning chain. And this would be for the back panel as well as the front panels. So the 54 chains constitute the length of the cardigan. So now I am chaining 54 chains, and I'm going to speed this up a little bit so you don't have to hear me count. So once you've completed your 54 chains, turn your work and you'll see the back bumps. I like to insert my stitches in the back bumps of that foundation chain. And so in the second chain from your hook, 1, 2, you're going to insert in that back bump, that second chain, you're going to insert a half double crochet. I like to use stitch markers so that I know where I am in the row and my work doesn't turn into a trapezoid. That tends to happen quite a bit even with the most seasoned crocheters. So I like to use stitch markers to mark the beginning and end of my rows. And so I'm going to insert another half double crochet in the next stitch and in every stitch across. So this would be half double crochet number 3, again in that back bump, and this is for a neater edge for my project. So I've completed my row. This was my first row of half double crochets. And now I'm going to chain 1, turn my work, and in that very first stitch from the row below, I'm going to insert a half double crochet under both loops of that V. And once I do that, I'm going to insert a stitch marker again. This is to make sure that my work does not turn into some other odd shape. In the next stitch, I'm going to insert a half double crochet in the back loop only. And I'm going to do this until I get to the second to last chain in that row. And then the last one is going to be a normal half double crochet in both loops. So the entire project is worked in the back loop only. So I've completed the first front panel. This is what it looks like. And again, the back panel will just be continuing the width of the cardigan based on your child's measurements. And so we're going to repeat the front panel for that second front panel. And again, you're going to start every work with a slip knot, and then you're going to chain 54 plus 1. And this is exactly what we did for that first front panel. We're just going to repeat that for that second front panel. So again, you're going to chain 54 plus 1. So I've completed my front panels. Both front panels are completed, and now I'm going to lay them on top of the back panel so that they can line up on the sides and at the top. And this is so that we can start stitching the shoulders and eventually start working on the sleeves. I like using stitch markers to help me line up the front panels to the back panel. This is to make sure that they are equal on both sides. So the stitch markers help me make sure that the same number of rows on the front panel is matching that part of the back panel. Same thing for the other front panel. At this point, some people like to start joining. I typically don't. I like to work on the sleeves first and do the joining at the very end. So now we're working on the sleeves, and for the sleeves, based on my daughter's measurements, I am chaining 35 plus 1, and exactly what we did with the other panels, we're going to work in the back bump, and in the second chain from the hook, I'm going to insert a half double crochet, and in every chain across until the end of the row, I'm going to insert half double crochets. I like to use stitch markers, like I said. This keeps my work from turning into another shape, and it makes sure that I have the same number of stitches in every row for the entirety of the project. So for the sleeves, we are going to do something a little bit different. I am still inserting half double crochets in the back bumps of every chain from that foundation row. However, I do want the cardigan sleeves to have a tight cuff at the end. And so when I get to about 5 to 6 chains left on that first row of half double crochets, I'm actually going to switch from half double crochets to slip stitches. So I have about 5 left here, and so I'm going to start inserting slip stitches rather than half double crochets, and that's going to give me that tight cuff feel and look at the end of that row, which would be the end of the sleeve. So again, using the back bump only, I am inserting slip stitches in those last 5 to 6 chains at the end of that row, which would be the end of the sleeve. Once I reach the end, I'm going to chain 1, turn my work, and again, going back up the sleeve, I'm going to insert slip stitches all the way till that blue stitch marker, and then from that point on, it'll be back to half double crochet. So the way you're going to work the sleeves is you're going to work half double crochets, and then when you get to the end of your sleeve, about the last 5 to 6 stitches, depending on how long or how short you want the cuffs to be, you're going to switch from half double crochets to slip stitches. And you're just going to keep doing that for the remainder of the sleeve. And so again, inserting slip stitches. A word of advice when you are working with slip stitches, you want to make sure that your stitches are quite loose, not too tight, because then you're going to run into issues where your hook is not going through the loops. And so especially because we're working in the back loop, you want to make sure that as you're working on your slip stitches, they're not tight, so that when you come back to work your next row of slip stitches, it's easier to get your hook in there. So that's just something to keep in mind when working slip stitches in any project, but especially in this one. Just as we did with the back panel and the front 2 panels, we are working in the length of the sleeve. And so you would measure, what I did is I measured my daughter's sleeve starting from the top of her shoulder down to her wrist, and that came up to the 35 chains that we worked in that foundation chain. And so you're going to do the same thing. You're going to measure your child's shoulder to wrist, and that's going to give you the sleeve. So we're working in the length. We're still using the back loop only. The only difference with the sleeve is that we are doing slip stitches at the very end for the cuff. So here you have the sleeve almost completed. I fast forwarded so you don't have to see me complete the entire sleeve in real time, but essentially, like I said, you are working in the back loop only. You're working half double crochets. When you get to the last 5 to 6 stitches, you're going to switch from half double crochets to slip stitches, and that's going to give you that nice cuff at the end. We're almost done with the sleeve here. I just kind of wanted to show you what the sleeve looks like when it's halfway done. Now, to know when to stop is the width of your sleeve, or the circumference. And so what I did was I used my daughter's bicep. I measured it, and then I use that measurement as the width of the sleeve. And so this is the sleeve when it's completed. We have our front panels that have been attached to the back panel, and I attach them by using a darning needle and just whip stitching across. I'm going to show that again later in the video how I did that, but right now I have the back panel completed, front panels completed, I have a sleeve completed. I've joined the back panel with the two front panels, and now I am attaching the sleeves to the project. So this is where you really want to make sure that you're measuring your product so that it's equal on both sides. And so here I'm showing how to do the second sleeve. Again, we're just doing half double crochets in a back loop only. When you get to the end of your sleeve, you want to switch to slip stitches and work those again in the back loop only. Here's the final joining of the second sleeve. So I kind of just lay it down, make sure that it's facing the right way. So you want to make sure that you have it inside out. This entire project has been worked inside out, and so when it's completed, I'll just turn it right side out. And so this is how I join my sleeves to the body of the cardigan, and I did the same thing for the front panels. This is how I join them. So I just use a darning needle, I insert the yarn, and then I just use the mattress stitch is what some people call it. I learned to do this when I learned how to sew, so pretty much just weave in the yarn through the stitches. Here I'm lining up, making sure that everything's lined up, and then I'm just going to stitch across. So at this point, I've joined all of the parts of the cardigan. So the sleeves are attached, the front panels are attached, and now what's remaining is the bottom part of the arms to the sides of the cardigan. So that's the next step, is whip stitching those parts, and that's really the end of the project. So right now I'm lining them up, making sure that they're lined up before I start whip stitching. And now I'm going to take my darning needle, insert the yarn, and then just stitch those areas right there. So this would be the left side and then the right side. So just making sure that they're lined up correctly, and then just whip stitching. And so this is the final product. Everything's been joined using the whip stitch, and it's been, at this point, it has been turned right side out, and this is what the final product looks like. And again, this was for my daughter. She's on the smaller side, so this is a small cardigan. Now, some people add pockets. My daughter doesn't really care for those, and so no pockets, and this is it.